Just here at the University of Texas, we have the philosopher of science, Larry Loden. Now, this is what it says in the Philosophy of Science, a very short introduction again by Oxford University. This is what the philosopher of science, Carl Stanford, explains. This is what it says in Evidence in Evolution, published by Cambridge University. In Zoonomia, which was written by Erasmus Darwin, Darwin's grandfather, in Zoological Philosophy by John Baptiste Lamarck.
Right, the term Darwinism means something different here in the US than it means in the UK. American scientists wouldn't use the word Darwinism at all. American historians might, but only if they're talking about Darwin's own postulations. Natural selection, sexual selection are the Darwinian mechanisms because it was Darwin who first proposed them. But if you look at these last three lines, you'll see that among senior British scientists, the word Darwinism is just a synonym for biological evolution. Now, when the National Academy of Science, now referring to the National Academy of Science again.
Now, you brought up Wikipedia and you said the definition of Darwinism in the US and the UK is different. Sorry, I'm just not going to accept that. That's just the silliest thing I've heard in the last 10 minutes, right? And also, you brought up the National Science Foundation, and you said some interesting things, right? So, National Science Foundation, they are not a published peer-reviewed philosophical paper authority like the Journal of Theoretical Biology or other ones. How can you use them as an authority?
In successive stages. It is also a fact that every animal on Earth, as you mentioned before, has definite relatives either living nearby or in the fossil record. There are ways of establishing this hierarchy of arrangement. And it was done 300 years ago. So it doesn't take a whole lot of technology to figure this out. There's the simple game of Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. That's all that you need, really, to establish this kind of a hierarchy.
Okay, and you said it was as easy as Sesame Street.
Except, I don't like to use the word absolute.
Sure.
Until we have...
No, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. Okay, so let's first get into that, right? Because I thought that was really interesting. Okay, universal common ancestry. Aaron used the example of Sesame Street. I love Sesame Street. I was born in the 80s, right? I have nothing against Bertie, right? Even though it's got a horrible haircut. Sesame Street, that's ridiculous. Try and find a evolutionary biologist that's going to agree with that, or philosopher of science that's going to agree with that. I'm just going to highlight two books here. This is Evidence in Evolution by Cambridge University, and this is Parsimony, Phylogeny and Genomics by Oxford University. This is what the books agree about. Universal common ancestry is based on a probabilistic framework which has assumptions, and there's conceptual problems. So let's look at Aaron's Sesame Street example, and let's look at what they say. Universal common ancestry and separate ancestry are testable hypotheses. Nothing about Sesame Street so far. Claiming homology, which is similarity due to common descent, your Sesame Street example. Claiming homology is a fact, and then testing it using, and then testing universal common ancestry versus separate ancestry is circular reasoning.
The problem with some of the claims that the scientists are making is, although there are other mechanisms, they don't have the same weight as natural selection does. I mean, there's like a niche generation, for example.
Niche construction.
Niche construction, thank you. It has nothing to do with that sentence.
This book is referring to genetics, morphology, and physiology.
But that's not the sentence you got, is it?
It is.
The sentence you got says nothing about
have you
genetics.
read this book? Have you even got this book?
Did you
how
read
can you
that
say I'm
sentence?
misquoting it? I read the whole thing.
If you read that book, if you read that sentence, tell me where the word genetics or anything applying genetics shows up in that sentence.
Perfect. By the process of random genetic drift. And the lineages have been evolving for a long time. So it's within the context of genetics, physiology, and morphology.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mention anything that was discovered since 1974. We already knew that.
You're going off on a tangent now.
We agree
you
that
said it was an absolute fact.
That argument doesn't help you.
No, you said it was an absolute fact, and according to mainstream academics, it's based on a probabilistic framework which has assumptions and conceptual problems like homology, homoplasy,
except that it didn't bring up the conclusive factor that I just mentioned.
Oh,
it
so
brought up what they knew in 1974. Then. It brought up what they knew in 1974, but didn't bring up what they knew in 1994.
Okay. It's interesting. This book was published in 2008, so Cambridge University isn't up to date.
It's not my fault that they don't include the conclusive factor.
Okay, let's just assume Cambridge University don't know what they're talking about, right? My question is very particular.
Okay.
Let me ask the question, you can answer it.
Okay.
You mentioned homology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you, at the end of the book, you had loads of facts in there. It's a fact that we have a common ancestor. It's a fact that's definitive.
Right.
You can take the genomes and you can get a basal form. You said it's a fact. Yet, and I find this very strange, you didn't mention the fact that homology, and to use homology is, you have to use it within a probabilistic framework, which has assumptions, and they are conceptual problems. Not once did you mention that there is such a thing as homoplasy. If you mentioned that in your book, I would have no problem. And I
did.
No
I did explain about probabilistic, yes.
No, why did you call it a fact then?
Because in fact, it's not absolute.
Okay, that's good. You said that. Here are your words exactly. And if I misquote you, I'm going to give you this. We're recording everything so somebody can go online and find out. Right? It would be perverse to say taxonomical classification are a fantastically improbable accident of coincidence. That would be a statistical impossibility which reaches into the realm of reality denial. Okay? It is an absolute fact. That's what you said.
Yep. You have a qualifier that this fact is absolute. The word fact is not absolute. The definition of fact is not absolute. But some facts are absolute, and I just explained that 5 minutes ago. So how would you explain that? You know, you make these predictions where nobody predicted Homo erectus. That was a bit of a surprise, right? People found Neanderthalensis. That was a bit confusing. But then you get into Homo erectus, and now you find Homo erectus all over the place, displaced all over Asia and Africa and parts of Europe. How do you account for Homo habilis, Homo rudolfensis, Homo floresiensis?
Homo naledi, yeah? Look, okay, let me answer it 2 ways. I'm going to answer it as a Muslim, not as a zebra, and also I'm going to answer it in context to this debate, right? Number one, anything that they find, Homo naledi, Homo erectus, whatever they find, to take those skulls and to take a line of fossils and to claim that this is a descendant of this, according to Henry Gee, an evolutionary biologist, just like all the rest of them, and an atheist, he says that it is not a scientific hypothesis that can be tested, but a bedtime story. You can't prove it with a fact. This is what Henry Gee says in his book, Misunderstandings of Human Evolution, right?
Let me give you an example.
Let me answer that question, right? So, if you're going to use similarities and say, therefore, common descent, then I'm just going to repeat the same thing like I did previously, like a parrot. That is based upon a probabilistic framework which has assumptions and there's conceptual problems, such as homoplasy, similarities which are not due to common descent. So if you're going to maintain the line of Sesame Street, similarities are due to common descent except when they're not.
And you missed the part where I explained homoplasy too.
Okay, let me answer, right? Secondly, and this is as a Muslim, right? Okay, these things existed. I mean, it's not a theological problem for us. I mean, theologically, look, if we're going to get into this, theologically, it's not even a problem if, somebody says, the whale evolved from some sort of land mammal. I mean, look, these things are irrelevant, right? When it comes to Islam, it's a religion in which we worship the one creator, we believe God is the cause behind all things. But when it goes into particular things about this might be an ancestor of this or this might be this particular thing, the way I think about it is, look, let the scientists do their work, right? That's why I accept it as a paradigm, I accept it as a model, I accept it as a theory. But the same reason I believe that it is not an absolute fact is the same reason why you believe string theory is not an absolute fact, because they're both scientific